Powered by Reb Media in partnership with TSN, this is Season 5, and it is Episode 33 of the Reinhart Dregs Hockey Podcast, presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, who have introduced the first release of the Canadian Club Invitation Series, CC 15-year-old Sherry Cask, all the hallmarks of classic Canadian Club, with the added richness and sweetness of sherry. Thank you, Tiny, chirping in with the Canadian Club Whiskey read. So you're going to appreciate this, Ray. I don't travel nearly as much anymore, and the lovely Holly Dreger almost never travels. Almost never.
Right.
And if she does, it's normally with me. That's just the way it is. So she's seeing family in BC, as we talked about recently. Decides after 2 weeks she's coming home. So books her flight out of Kelowna, and it's like a 4:00 Pacific flight, which is often in that danger zone anyway when you're coming basically across country. So she gets a notice, flight's delayed by 2 hours.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why I find this amusing. So well, supposed to be a 6:15 departure.
Let me interrupt. If you're through security in Kelowna, you've got about 42 square feet of space to move around in there. So
not a lot of, well, actually, good luck. You know, they alerted that there was this delay well in advance. So she wasn't even at the airport. So that's fine. That's fine. Gets there. Now another 2.5 hour delay.
Uh-oh.
So the 4 p.m. Pacific flight is scheduled to leave at like 8:37 p.m. The poor woman. So now I'm kind of all over the place. I was sort of kind of just okay with the idea picking her up at the airport at midnight Eastern. Right? Ooh. On a 4 p.m. Pacific flight. So obviously, I got a busy day ahead. We've got the podcast, I've got insider trading, we've got the Leafs and the Oilers tonight on the network. Yeah, I got a full plate. So I decided, look, I'm just going to send the car service pick her up. She walked in this morning into the house at 4:50 Eastern a.m.
That's a day right there. And you know the best
But you've
part?
done it.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. And she's going to feel fantastic till about noon.
Yeah, I know.
So I can jump a little travel story. I don't know if you noticed. I sent out a tweet this weekend that
yeah, I did.
I forgot my laptop in the plane in Denver. Get to the hotel. I'm staying right across the walkway. Thankfully, I get to the hotel. I'm like, my computer. So I go back to the hotel or go back to the airport. The baggage person has me fill out like a claim thing.
Yeah.
They go, you usually hear within 10 days. I'm like, 10 days? Okay, man, that's no good. But anyway, I go back to the hotel. I get up. I got a flight delay for 3.5 hours in the morning, which is, I'm like, that's no good. But, maybe I can find the computer. So I go back, talk to one person at United. They were super helpful. I'm showing them on my phone. It says it's in the airport. Like on the Find My Track.
You have a locator. Yeah.
So he goes, it's in the B terminal. He goes, right by the C's Candy. And I'm like, what? I'm picturing some person working on my computer by a kiosk or something. So I go over there. I get into line at customer service. There's like 50 people in it. And this guy behind me goes, hey, buddy, are you looking for something? Because I'm on my phone. I'm looking. I go, yeah. I tell him the story. He goes, well, I know what you look like. He goes, go to the United Club. Maybe somebody can help you there. It was right down the, 100 meters away. And he goes, I'll save your spot. I go down there. It's mayhem because there's flights delayed and stuff. And the woman behind the counter goes, she points at me and she goes, do you need some help? I was just standing there kind of taking it in. Yeah. I go, yeah, I do. I lost my computer or I forgot my computer. I show her the thing. She takes her coffee. We walk out. She goes, oh my God, I just need a quiet place to drink my coffee. She goes, let's see if we can find your computer. We go to customer service. I ping it off my phone. I can hear it in the customer service thing. It sounds like a sonar. Have you ever done that? Like
no.
Ping when you find your computer, there's a ping on it. It's a locator. And it starts going boing, 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 like this, right? And I'm like, it's here. It's somewhere. She goes back behind this, I don't know, sort of wall thing, comes out with my computer, and I just had to enter into it, and I got it back. So lucky. But everybody was awesome, helpful, man.
Well, and so as you're telling this story again, we've traveled enough together, and I also know how hard you've worked on honing your travel skills independently. Because
Yes.
again, in previous lives, you'd have Gord Miller or others as part of an entourage. Patience wasn't necessarily high
No.
on the list of things that you were noted for. It sounds like you've changed that, man. Like that whole story was impressive.
It was really, I walked away. I was like, wow, I kind of handled that mayhem okay. That was okay. And one last thing. So, when you're standing around, sometimes you run into people. I run into this woman. I'm starting to talk to her. We're talking about pretty soon now we got a couple of things in common. She goes, oh, yeah, we lived up in Vancouver for a few years when our boys played hockey. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I said, where did they play? She says, North Shore Winter Club. How old are they? They're like, oh, 32. I'm like, oh, my son played at Burnaby Winter Club. He's 32. It was Drew Shore's parents and Nick Shore's parents.
Come on.
I'm like, oh, hi, how are you guys? So I had 40-minute talk in the airport. It was amazing. So it turned out to be a good day.
You know what? See, this is going to be, let's hope it isn't, but it could be the best part of the podcast today.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we can climb the ladder here a little bit.
All right. Well, we'll do that in Tim Horton's headlines. For 60 years, Tim's has been supporting and loving hockey at both the community and the pro levels. From partners like Sidney Crosby, Marie-Philippe Poulin, Sarah Nurse, and Nathan McKinnon, to initiatives like the Timbits hockey program with over 100,000 participants across the country, Tim's is proud to be part of growing the game in Canada. Midpoint of the season, more or less midpoint of the season, and more drama in Columbus, Ray. 29-year-old goaltender Elvis Merzlikins tells media on Monday that he's requested a trade. So healthy scratch in 4 of 5. He makes 27 saves in a shootout win over the Vancouver Canucks. 3-goalie system, as we know, is a challenge, right? And, without getting into too much detail, Elvis makes it abundantly clear he's certainly had enough. I guess what I feel for here is what is the market? And we talk about goaltending almost on pod-by-pod basis. But what is the market for a guy who's a $5.4 million cap hit for the rest of this year, plus 3 more after this year? It's going to be a challenge for Jarmo.
It's slightly better than acquiring us to play goal. like there's no chance.
It's hard. No.
Like the first thing I thought of when I saw him, and I get like he's frustrated and mad and angry and all those things, but he hasn't stopped the puck very well, and he's got this contract with him, right? And so the first thing I thought of was, I wonder if there's a deal with Edmonton in there somewhere. They got a goalie they don't want contract. Either. Yeah. Right. And I'm like, but does that help you at all? Because is he better than Stu Skinner? Because if he's not, and I don't think he is, then why would you pay a guy $5.4 million to wear a ball hat?
Yeah.
You wouldn't. And I'm looking around, I'm like, this sounds like, or looks like a deal. If it's going to happen, it's going to be in the summer. When teams can figure out more of their cap and they've got a little more space and you can work money come back, money go out, and it's going to be really, really challenging. It's also going to be challenging if he plays once every 3 weeks.
That was going to be the point I was going to make. If you're Jarmo Kekalainen, you just go down to Pascal Vincent and say, sorry, man, but whatever your goalie schedule is, we're changing that. If there's going to be a market for this guy who clearly doesn't want to be in Columbus anymore, we're going to have to create that environment, and it can only happen if he strings some games together.
It's the only way. Another point to this thing is, like you said, more drama in Columbus. Isn't it amazing that just seems to stick there?
Yeah, it does.
It's one after another, and it really can't be. It makes me think that if they're really going to change the culture there, they've got to change everything.
Right. Yeah.
That's what it's just too long where things just they've been really close for a little bit, and then it's kind of gone to tatters now. And it's hard to do it on the fly, a piece here, a piece there. It's like you almost have to change everything.
Yeah, I'm with you. And look, not to get into the skull of Jarmo Kekalainen or John Davidson, but specific to Jarmo, you kind of wonder, after being there so long and having some level of success, but not continued success, and not the level of success that they've invested in to try and attain, if you just go, yeah, I think it's time for all of us to go different directions.
Eventually, you might not have any more ideas.
Well, it kind of seems like that's where they're at, doesn't it? Marc-Andre Fleury, if we stay in the vein of goaltending, moves into second all-time. And we love the Flower. Who doesn't? I mean, he's just such, a friendly but fierce competitor. 552 wins, just passing Patrick. Wow.
Amazing.
Shutout win over the Islanders. And as the Flower joked about post-game, it took a while to get there. Things weren't kind of tracking the way he was hoping. But when you think of that in historical way, what an accomplishment, right? For a highly decorated goaltender, a real good dude in Marc-Andre Fleury, and fitting. He's not going to catch Marty Brodeur. Come on, like 691 wins. But a fitting place in history for one of the game's good guys. Fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just think of the consistency involved, Dregs, in doing this. That's to average about 27 and a half wins for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, who's doing that again? Nobody. Like, he's such a, it's freakish that, the success, the health, the attitude, the not in one place, bouncing around to different places and being able to do it again and again and again. And
yeah,
it's also kind of weird. I guess this is as you get older. When you watch somebody come in at the start, have a long career, and then finish, and you remember it all, that's kind of, it's an odd place in your life to do. Man, I remember when Fleury was drafted.
Yeah.
That's 100 years ago. And here he is still playing. And now if Minnesota doesn't catch the pack here, which seems unlikely, is he in play at the deadline?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was going to. I mean, it feels fitting, doesn't it? I mean, the man is 39 years old. He's in the final year of an expiring contract. By the time you get to March 8th, the cap hit is palpable. You can probably deal with it, but even as just depth, right? I mean, you wouldn't expect him to come in and shoulder the load, but maybe he could. Maybe one more deep playoff push with Marc-Andre Fleury. Why wouldn't, if he's willing, he's got the no move, if he's willing to engage and Minnesota is out of it, any team that even has a slight concern or question in goaltending, wouldn't you have to have that conversation and see if there's a fit?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a couple right away where it would be, like, the problem is I don't want to say anything because then it starts to sound like you're just cultivating a rumor. But I can think of a couple right away that make three really great sense to bring in. Oh, since it's three, it's not a rumor. So I'm going to say anyway. So I'm thinking LA, Colorado, and Edmonton.
Okay.
Because in each case, like David Riddick played really well for LA yesterday, but Cam Talbot's 36. Alexander Georgiev in Colorado plays double headers. I mean, like, he's playing every game.
Just wild, yeah.
They need another guy there. Edmonton, I mean, Pickard has done a terrific job, but if you could upgrade to Fleury, then without blowing up your cap, like, they're going to have to try and add a little bit more there, but maybe it kind of fits. I don't know. Those are three teams anyway. I haven't put any thought to it, but those are three that jumped at me.
Well, something to watch for sure as we creep closer to the March 8th trade deadline. Ray, how about the year Sam Reinhart is having, right? And, I don't want to say that he doesn't get enough of media attention, because he does. I mean, the media market in Florida is different than a lot of places around the National Hockey League. So if you're using that as measurement, okay, Sam doesn't get the recognition he deserves with 32 goals, one back of Matthews. But you talk about contracts, and this guy's on a goal-scoring pace here, right? 7 games straight with a goal.
Oof,
he's a $6.5 million. Yeah, $6.5 million cap hit, which is a bargain based on what he's doing for the Panthers. 28 years old. He's an unrestricted this summer. We know that there are ongoing contract discussions with the Florida Panthers. And the sense is that, it's a tricky one because Florida has the same cap issues that so many other teams do, right?
Right.
Toronto found a way to extend William Nylander, 92 schmills, so it wasn't much of a discount there. But Reinhart loves Florida so much, and you do have the tax benefits of playing in the state of Florida. I just think that this is one of those, maybe similar to Nylander, but different in that Reinhart wants to stay. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's staying with the Florida Panthers, but maybe less money. We'll see, but maybe less. But he deserves whatever he can get.
It's going to be interesting to play out. The length of the deal is going to be interesting to me. There's two ways to look at it. So Sam is not a blazer, right? He's not a great skater. No. So that you always worry about how a great skater, an average or to slightly better than average, I guess, skater, how does that age? That's of course part A. Part B is, what if it's better if you're not a great skater and successful when you're 28 years old?
Yeah.
Like maybe you're the same skater at 35. You're not going to get any faster, but you might not get any slower either. Some guys that are fantastic skaters, they've been able to outskate their problems their whole lives. And when you're not a great skater, you got to be a great thinker. If Reinhart's a thinker, like he's a really clever player. So that's a tough one because he's scoring at such an incredible rate. I do think though, in these years where players are like that, the managers have to look and go, okay, this is not the norm. And you have to try to get to a point with the player and their representation that they understand this is not the norm. Let's look at the last 3 or 4 years and figure out what the norm is and what does that norm pay. Like that would be the goal anyway. I'm sure it's different. I'm sure it's never that easy.
And maybe the compromise is in the term, right? I mean, at 28, maybe you give him a year or two longer than you're comfortable with, but you do that because you can then manage the annual average salary, and it makes it more consumable if you're Billy Zito. Anyway, we'll see. I mean, it does feel
he's
like
having a great year, though. He's having
terrific.
A great year.
One thing if we could touch,
right? Yes, this might be Paul Maurice's best coaching job because they've had to manage the Montour, Ekblad, Bennett for most of the first 6 weeks of the season. Looked like, remember he said at the end of the year, he set everybody up, by the way. He's the best at this. He goes, it's going to be tough to make the playoffs next year with the injuries we've got. And stop it, Paul. But he's done I think an amazing job this year.
You know who doesn't get we're throwing out the accolades and giving credit here. Walt Tkachuk doesn't get enough credit for lighting a fire under Matthew in the way that he did last year. Remember?
They said, "What do they want? They want to get autographs.
Looking for autographs."
Yeah.
I mean, if you track it all the way back to that comment, I'm not so sure that the Florida Panthers and Matthew Tkachuk specifically in the group didn't kind of launch from that point forward.
One last thing on Florida, because you mentioned it and we skimmed through it about the tax advantages. And there are so many people that, when a contract gets signed, a big one like Nylander's, fans get so upset about the tax advantages to teams like Florida and stuff. And they say, why can't there be like an NHL tax rate? And there just can't be, because you can't call the government and say, we're going to tax our players on our own scale. And so if a player from Florida gets traded to a player in Canada, what do you do about the salary now that doesn't fit? Because he's got an NHL salary and it's way too complicated to even begin to try and find an answer for, but it is an advantage to the teams that have no state tax for sure.
No question. Toronto on the road, right, this week. Bit of a gauntlet, I would say, for the Maple Leafs. So they've got Edmonton tonight, Calgary Thursday, Vancouver on Saturday, and we'll throw Seattle into the mix for good measure.
Ooh, they've played great.
Really good, yeah. So I was at the game on Saturday where they gave up the 3-0 lead to the Colorado Avalanche. The Avs scored 5 unanswered. Then followed that up by giving up 3 in the third in the 4-2 loss on Sunday to Detroit. Craig Button teed off on TSN after the loss to Colorado, which, by the way, as we know, isn't unusual for Craig. Craig will, every once in a while, tee off when something kind of gets the wires touching. He said Toronto isn't a contender. And, I mean, do we use one game to indicate that? Normally I would push back and I would debate, but the way that Toronto lost that game to a legit Stanley Cup contending Colorado Avalanche team, I can see where he's going with that. Because, again, watching it up close, Colorado just didn't seem to have it in the first period. And Toronto gets a couple of, I'll call them, the Morgan Riley breakaway was a beautiful backhand. That was a really nice goal. But 2 defensemen score for the Leafs. Colorado then flips the switch in the second period. And it felt like Nate McKinnon, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen never left the ice. Never left the ice until they tied the game and then got the lead and, the way they went. So how big of an indicator, how big of a measuring stick can a game like that be when you're trying to establish what being a true Stanley Cup contender is?
Well, I don't think one game ever is really you get the full picture. But if that one game is an illustration of what you think bigger issues are, then I think that's really where the problem is. And that's, I'm assuming what touched the wires for Craig. And for many that were watching, don't forget Colorado didn't have Val Nichushkin either in the game, right? So you're like, that's another pretty good player. So I don't know if you watched a football game last night. The Eagles got eliminated.
Yeah.
And it wasn't one game. The problems they were having in the last 4 or 5 weeks, they kind of painted a bigger picture that it was almost inevitable that they weren't going to win. And I think the picture that gets painted in Toronto is they're just not quite deep enough. They're just not quite stout enough on defense. And I think that picture, a bigger picture, is more important than the one game, like having the 3-0 lead and losing it. Right. And so I think Toronto's one of the best 10 teams in the league. I do for sure. And so any one of those 10, you could say, sure, of course they could win. But I look at over the last couple of years how freaking miserable and hard and it is to win. And I'm like, can Toronto win 16 games? And I'm like, as of today, I say they can't.
Yeah. And Sheldon Keefe is trying to hold guys accountable, right? It's not just the scratching of David Kampf, a number of games back. More or less benches his captain, John Tavares, through a good chunk of that third period against Colorado. Tyler Bertuzzi played just over a minute. Tavares just, like players go through. He's in a bit of a funk. I don't think that he's lost his skill set. I mean,
no, he hasn't lost his skill set. But just think of the 2 players in the game that you mentioned that didn't play very much. Yeah. Do you see a commonality? They don't have much pace.
Right.
And what does Colorado play with? They play with pace. And that if you look again, just look on a bigger scale, not just that one day, but the lack of pace for Bertuzzi and Tavares is a concern. If you play them together, if you spread them apart, how does that manifest itself on 2 different lines like that? Those are tricky calls, and maybe the answer is you can't have one plan for it. You're going to have to move it around. I will say this though, Andrew Cogliano scored in that game. One of my all-time favorites. I just if you want to see someone that is in love with every portion of the game, go talk to Andrew Cogliano for 15 minutes. And if you want to watch something that will, if you like detail, it will crack you up, Dregs, watch him lace his skates. There is not a wrinkle in those skate laces. I talked to him in Denver, and I was watching him. The room's empty. The trainers are setting the game. Now they're taking all the practice stuff away and putting the game jerseys up and stuff.
Yeah,
he's still there. We're talking. He's lacing his stuff. I miss Bednar's availability. We were talking. I was like, he's one of my favorites. And so I'm so happy to see him score. He just loves the game.
One final thing on the Leafs, because you're a power play guy, right? And I'm going back and forth with, I'm going back and forth. Well, I mean, you have a mind that's designed around thinking about how power play should operate. So I'm going back and forth with a guy who's invested with the Leafs and isn't happy with, again, a sagging power play. It hasn't produced of late. It's not crisis, but it's like everything else about their game. It's sagging right now. And he's like, oh, well, how about this old school? Why does the first unit always have to go out first? Like, these guys aren't doing what you need them to do, which is scoring goals, creating offense. Hey, throw the second unit a bone and send them over the boards first and see what happens. That's old school, but if you're a first unit, if you're Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner, are you sitting there looking back at Sheldon going, are you for real?
Oh,
if
yes,
you were
you
to
are.
do that. Are you?
Yes, you are for sure. If it happens once, you wouldn't, but if it happened over the course of a game, yeah, for sure. The second part, the reason the second unit is the second unit is because they're the second unit.
Right,
and,
right.
Like the chances of them scoring are your power play goes, takes a hit percentage-wise with the second group. That's just the fact of the matter. Here's the thing. Last year, the Oilers, I think they were about 32%. It was like a historic power play. So you can say that means they score 3 out of 10. Yeah, they miss 7 out of 10. Yeah. So say they have a couple of weeks where they go and they're at 10%.
Yeah.
And they go from 32% to 27%. So what? Because they're going to get a stretch where, if you think they're a real good power play, which they are, they'll end up, that's 82 games is a hell of a long time. They're going to end up against a team that kills power play or a team that can't kill penalties, and they're going to get 4, and then they're going to feel great again. And that's the life of a power play. It drives people crazy, but that's what it is.
Okay, how about the minor hockey approach then? Okay, whichever power play unit scores the goal starts the next one.
See, I don't mind that. Sure, go ahead with that. Why don't you put a couple defensemen up front too? And then the other thing you don't get in minor hockey, I'm sure nobody's making $1 million there, but if you got a bunch of guys making 10.5 and they're sitting on the bench in front of you, you're not really building the bridge to them. Your job as the coach is to figure out a different way to get out of it. That, by the way, is Guy Boucher, right? That took over the power play. Let's not reinvent the wheel here. And so, like, they're in that soup together.
Yeah.
And all the power play can do when it struggles is to simplify, to shoot, to retrieve. And as you shoot and retrieve, then you can start making plays.
All right. All right. We had some fun with that. Let's wrap up headlines with another kind of lighter item. Not that the Leaf situation is light, but we had some fun with it. Who is this year's Florida Panthers, right? A team that you can see that kind of gets into the playoffs, but then all of a sudden something sparks and they get fueled by momentum, which drives them deep into the playoffs. I mean, we're past the midpoint of the regular season. Is there somebody, and it could be obvious, I don't know. I mean, is there somebody in the grouping that you look at as either just outside the wild card line or maybe just inside the wild card line that you think is going to be good?
So you're not going to let me pick Edmonton, right?
No.
They don't count?
No.
They don't count.
I was thinking New Jersey. That's what I was thinking. That's a long way away from
Jersey's got no players now. Like they're just limping along trying to be moderately healthy. Hey, Ollie. Yeah. Ollie just popped in here. And
nice.
Good morning. And what about I got a couple like Detroit or Philly?
Yeah.
Might like I'm starting to get to the point with Philly is like they just don't go away.
No,
every time you think they're not going to be quite it, they put together another solid game. You know who's given them some? Joel Farabee is a good player. He is a really good player. And Sam Urson in goal, you know, you never hear much about him. And then all of a sudden, look, check out his record. Take away his first couple of starts this year where he had a little stage fright. He's been amazing. And as much as it'll piss people off, Rick Bowness and Rick Tocchet, I think, are front runners for Coach of the Year, but so is John Tortorella.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But you can't pick Winnipeg as this year's Florida. They're in first place. But Detroit's like all of a sudden Detroit's barking at Toronto's heels here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, maybe, because did we really think Florida was going to do that last year? We sure didn't.
Not really. No. Detroit is sneaky. I'm with you on that one. Again, watching that game against the Leafs, they play a pretty stingy style, right? I mean,
anything with Kane? Did you
team.
hear anything with Kane?
I haven't, and I meant to check on it. Obviously, that didn't look good, right? Especially when he came back to the bench, and you could see that he was in some pain. Yeah. So definitely something we have to follow up on. I'll keep you posted. All right. Those are your headlines. Thank you to Tim Hortons.
For 60 years, we've been beside you, loving hockey. Through the highs, the lows, and everything in between. The game's come a long way, and together we can take it further.
Our interviews on Ray and Dregs are brought to us by Canadian Club Whiskey, who have released the first release of the Canadian Club Invitation Series, the CC 15-year-old Sherry Cask, signature CC Classic 12-year-old whiskey, finished with a secondary aging in Oloroso Sherry Casks. Time for a couple of questions, maybe three. We'll see how we work through Ask Ray and Dregs Anything. You can submit your questions to us on our socials, at Ray and Dregs, or on the website rayanddregs.com. Greetings, Ray, from Connecticut. Big fan of yours since the early days with the whale. Going back to
the pesky whale. Pesky whale.
Now, I remember in those early days, the watchword for words was no mistakes. Since the Whalers players at the time couldn't beat the other teams on talent alone. So think back to the personnel on that team, Ray, who later went on to coach and manage in the NHL. So we're looking at Ron Francis, Bob Crawford, Dave Tippett, Dean Evison, Kevin Dineen, Joel Quenneville, of course. Such talent for leadership, and maybe we missed a couple here. Now I like to think that part of the reason for all of those men developing into such good coaches and managers was Coach Tex Evans and his emphasis on minimizing mistakes. So, Ray, what do you think? If not, then is it just coincidence that all this NHL brainpower played in Hartford in the 80s?
We have talked about this before, whenever we've been together. Like, I mean, the players or ex-players, I guess we all are. And it's the oddest thing. I don't know that there's one thing you could say there's a Tex Evans coaching tree, because coaching was so different back then than it is today. And what made everybody in that room, or so many guys in that room, become legit NHL coaches? Like, I can tell you for a fact, like, I thought Dave Tippett would be a coach. Like, just the way Tippy played, the way he was playing a system before we had a system. You know, like he just knew he just knew what was going on. Ronnie Francis, I always felt like I didn't think he would coach. I felt like he would manage. Like he was just always in charge. If you would have told me Joel Quenneville was going to be a coach, I would have never guessed. Because nobody even thought about it. I was 20 years old or 22 years old. And who thought about what their teammates were going to do? We thought we were all going to play forever, you know? And so I don't know that there's one particular reason, but it is an inordinate number of people that out of that locker room coached, managed. Mike Liut's a longtime successful agent. Stu Gavin runs a financial company. It's really quite remarkable what's come out of there.
All right, that one from Daniel LaRose. Thank you for the submission, Daniel. Sean Top has a question, and actually an observation too, and he's wondering about Mullet Arena. Wants to know what happens if the Arizona Coyotes make the playoffs. And he wants us to answer this in two parts. Will they continue to play at Mullet Arena? The answer to that is yes. And oddly, Ray, this topic came up at the recent Board of Governors meetings, and Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley was kind of cornered after Gary Bettman's media availability, kind of talking about the future of the Coyotes, where they're at and whatnot. And Daly was almost offended, might be strong, but he was perturbed by the line of questioning. And, the question, will they play at Muller? Well, the reason it's being asked is because you've got a facility, 5,000 seats or less?
Yeah.
I mean, is that playoff worthy in the National Hockey League? And the hard answer to that is no. But what other
Where else
options
you going to go?
have? Where are you going to go?
Where else you going to go?
That's pretty much it. Yeah. So the follow-up question, if so, which we've established, yes, they go on a magical run to the Stanley Cup final. Ooh, maybe that's the team.
Oh, there we go.
That's the team that's going to be this year's Florida Panthers. So he's asking, so they go on this magical run to the Cup final. Which of these outcomes is more troubling for Commissioner Bettman? The terrible look to befall the NHL, or the fact that in a smaller arena, the boos he'd receive when presenting the cup might sound even louder than usual.
Right. I think I'd never even thought of this, but what if they do get there? And I mean, it's just a fun pretend thing, but where would everybody sit? Like, just think of how much infrastructure goes in there to just run a playoff game anyway, but a Stanley Cup final with, like, for example, there's 2 national broadcasts in there. Where does everybody fit? Where are they going to put 2 broadcast locations that everybody's going to be happy? It would be, I would love to be in those meetings just to see how they would piece it together, because I don't care what they say. It's a college experience, blah, blah, blah. I've never been there. I'll be there in April. I got a game. It would be a mess.
Yeah.
It would be a challenge times 10 for them.
And I wonder if they would reconsider, right? I mean, it's the reason I think that they were
reconsider what?
Out.
Move the city?
Well, the venue, you can't move the venue, but
what are they going to do? Call Glendale up and see if they can go back there and play?
Yeah, why not?
I guess. Could you? Now we're almost cheering for it. Cheering for it.
I know we are. And it reminds me, for insider trading, I should check that out, because at that Board of Governors meeting, of course, there was at least some progress being made on, the parcel of land that they were trying to secure, and then building the facility and all
Dregs,
that.
Don't check. Don't report on it.
Yeah, I know.
Don't tell me until they've got a shovel in the ground.
It does feel like we've talked endlessly about the future of the Coyotes. There's no doubt about that. All right, what's your travel schedule like? We started the podcast talking about some of the travel nightmares. What's your week look like?
I'm Wednesday. I'm going to LA for Nashville and LA. So the big trick's going to be, apparently it's going to snow overnight Tuesday, and snow plows are not in high reserve here in Vancouver. So I'm a little concerned about the Wednesday morning flight, but we'll see. It's just one game this weekend, and or this week, which is kind of nice. So
that was the ABC game. I caught parts of it.
It was good. What was not? It was just like it was a low event game,
right?
And
right.
You like, when you're broadcasting, of course, you like lots of things happening. I'll tell you who's having a hell of a year is Charlie Lindgren in goal for Washington. He really is. But it's fun to get back at it, and Saturdays always are fun, and they feel a little different, and so we're one in the books.
Yeah, busy week for me this week. Kind of
what
unusually.
You got the Oilers and the Leafs tonight.
Yeah, and then Calgary and Toronto on Thursday. And Ryan and Zuby and I were talking before you logged in, and I'm like, I'm not complaining. I mean, you guys juggle the Pacific region to accommodate the Eastern time zone every week, several times over the course of a month. And I'm looking at this week. I'm like, come on! I've got like an 8:30 Eastern pregame tonight, and a 9:10 puck drop. I'm not getting out of studio till midnight, for heaven's sake.
You know what's going to be awesome, Dregs. By the way, living out in Vancouver is Saturday is Canucks and Leafs.
Yeah,
right? 4 p.m. Pacific start. I love hearing the people in Vancouver complain about it. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the year.
Why? Because they're working and they can't get there in time. I would think you'd love it and go for dinner afterwards.
Yes, but they why do we have to do this for the Toronto people? Well, because that's the prime time region where the entire country lives. But it's actually one of my favorite things. I love it.
Well, good times. Okay, we'll revisit that, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of fodder from, we'll see how tonight's game goes, Matthews against McDavid, and we'll work some of our magic, and hopefully have a real special guest on Thursday, Ray. We're just ironing out the details. The negotiations are well underway here.
Oh, well, that's just, again, don't tell me. It's all on your plate. I know you'll pull through. Yeah. There's no way you could fail now.
All right, buddy. We'll enjoy the week and
enjoy the. Yeah, we'll talk. When are we? Thursday again? I think.
Yep, Thursday.
We decided.
Yep, Thursday
perfect.
Morning. Yeah. All right.
Talk then. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to our sponsors who continue to support Ray and Dregs, our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, and of course Tim Hortons. And yes, thank you for rating, for listening, and for sharing, and for following us on our YouTube channel as well. Until next time, stay safe, everybody.